Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities such as new companies and potential business partners and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest. Start investing and networking on public.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. I'm Cubby Lambert from the Punt and Finish, and with me is Ben Snyder. Feel free to leave a comment down in the chat below, ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer them live on the air. Before we get started, we'd like to thank our wonderful Patreon supporters, Colin, Mark, Deschelle, and Robin. Thank you so much. We appreciate you for investing in Grid Network and hope others watching will all do the same. This weekend, we have Formula One at the Red Bull Ring. NASCAR's going racing super speedway style for the second time at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Supercars action in Townsville, and SRX returns to the iconic Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway tonight with a big name from the NTT IndyCar Series making his SRX debut at home. The F1 sprint race in Austria just finished up a little while ago. Max Verstappen won. So first, let's start off with Ben about what's been happening so far this weekend in Spielberg.
That's right, Kobe. We got the F2 race going on right now. Actually, I'm trying to keep an eye on that here on my second monitor while we do the show here. Marcus Armstrong's currently leading that. But in terms of the F1 sprint race, Max Verstappen picked up the third sprint race victory of his career and picked up some additional points to boost his championship lead. The Red Bull driver will start from pole position tomorrow ahead of the Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Ferrari never seemed to let me down. They just couldn't seem to get out of their own way even during the sprint race. And some folks are wondering maybe if the battling that they went through in the opening laps maybe allowed Verstappen an easy path forward to the sprint race. But Kobe, in terms of the race tomorrow, we're obviously in Austria. This is Red Bull's home race, and it's a track that even bears their name, the Red Bull Ring. Does this give them any sort of home field advantage, if you will, going into the race tomorrow?
I'm actually a real believer in the home field advantage. If we look at last weekend's race at Silverstone, I really think Lewis Hamilton fed into the home field advantage. That's why we were able to see him run so well in what so far hasn't been a Lewis Hamilton-like season. As you said, this is not the best car that he's had in his Formula One career. It's probably the second worst car that he's had, and he's just trying to make best with what he has right now. And I won't forget the call on the broadcast we saw last weekend when Lewis Hamilton made that 3 wide pass going onto the front stretch in the final corner, and you heard a crowd erupt. I think when you're at home, drivers can really feed off of their home crowd, and we saw that last weekend with Lewis Hamilton, and I expect the same from Red Bull this weekend at the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg, Austria. So you see all the orange in the crowds, all the Max Verstappen fans. I think it's setting up to potentially be a major Red Bull party in Austria.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think anytime you have a home race for the team, or even the drivers as well, like you mentioned, Lewis Hamilton's been so successful at Silverstone, and obviously we've only done the Dutch Grand Prix one time, so kind of hard to look back at a full history there. But in the one race we do have to look back at, Max Verstappen was very successful there. So I think that this is going to be a bit of an advantage for Red Bull this weekend. And obviously Verstappen is starting in as good a position as you could possibly ask for, winning the sprint race. And obviously that means he will start on the first place in the grid tomorrow. Now, shifting gears to Mercedes, they looked as strong as they have all season last weekend at Silverstone. Some people thought Lewis Hamilton might be on course for the win at different points during the race, but they appeared to show some similar speed in practice and qualifying yesterday. However, both George Russell and Lewis Hamilton went off in Q3, which made for a long night for the Mercedes mechanics as they worked on both their cars. So in the sprint race today, Russell settled for 4th, while Hamilton had to settle a little bit even further back than that, down in 8th after a spirited battle with Mick Schumacher. So Kobe, we know Mick Schumacher is in the Haas, which is obviously a car that isn't as strong as the big three, if you will. They've made major improvements over the last couple of seasons. But still, were you surprised Mick was able to hold off Lewis as long as he was?
Yes, I was extremely surprised to see how Mick Schumacher was able to successfully defend Lewis for as long as he did, and as you mentioned, the Haas. So some weeks it seems like they're extremely strong, very competitive, and then other weeks, they have mistakes in the race, crashes, or it looks like they're lost. I really think we're finally starting to see Mick Schumacher come into his own as a Formula One driver, and I brought up this point multiple times on our Grid Network programs. If you follow the trajectory of Mick Schumacher's career, he typically isn't somebody who starts off in each series, very flashy. Like we see some drivers where they were in their first year, they set the world on fire, and it looks like they're going to be a superstar. For Mick Schumacher, it seems like he really dips his toes in the water in a way that that's slow, and then he starts to improve over time, and I think now we're really starting to see what Mick Schumacher can do, and if Haas keeps improving the car, or we get Mick Schumacher and a better car in the future, I think potentially we could see Mick Schumacher scoring points more often in Formula One, and if he gets in the right car, the right situation, it wouldn't surprise me if we see Mick Schumacher eventually competing for Grand Prix wins in Formula One.
Yeah, I said this on last week's show after he finally scored his first career points. It seems like Mick Schumacher really comes into his own his second season at each level in each category. He won the championship his second season in F3, and then, of course, in F2 in 2020, got the championship there. Last year, we knew was kind of going to be a throwaway with how dreadful that Haas was that he and Nikita Mazepin had to share. This season, the Haas have made some substantial improvements. Obviously, Kevin Magnussen had a great run at the season opener, and now Mick has some points as well. So it's clear Mick isn't going to continue the pattern of winning the championship. The Haas isn't a car that's capable of giving him that opportunity. But I do think you've seen Mick make some solid improvements this year, and I think you'll continue to see that as the season goes on. I don't think he scored his first and only points of the season. I think he'll continue to show improvements as we go forward here. Now, to follow back on the discussion with Mercedes here, Lewis Hamilton is running a streak of 15 consecutive seasons with at least one win. He's the only driver that's won in every season in which he's competed in Formula One. It looked like that streak might be in jeopardy at the start of this year with how far behind Mercedes were compared to Ferrari and Red Bull. But now that we've seen the improvements that they've made, they've shown a little bit more speed the last couple of weeks. Do you think Lewis can keep that win streak alive, given Mercedes' recent gains in performance?
If you asked me that several races ago, Ben, I would probably say that Lewis Hamilton's streaks in jeopardy, and Mercedes probably wouldn't win a race this year. But still, even with all the gains, I don't see Mercedes, winning a race on outright pace like we've seen from Red Bull and Ferrari this year right now. But I think if Red Bull, Ferrari run into trouble, something crazy happens with strategy, and Lewis Hamilton gets out front, and we've seen from time and time again Formula One how difficult it can be to overtake. I think if it's a situation like that where Verstappen, uh, Perez, Sainz, Leclerc run into some trouble, and Mercedes is the best of the rest, I certainly think Lewis Hamilton could really put himself in the position to win. I do see Lewis keep his win streak alive. I don't know when Lewis is going to win. I don't think it's going to be this weekend in Austria though, but I certainly think there'll be opportunities later in the season for Lewis Hamilton to get back on the top step of the podium.
Yeah, and even if it isn't on raw pace, you have to look at the idea that it's probably going to happen at some point where the Red Bulls and the Ferraris run into a little bit of trouble. And even when Mercedes themselves were so dominant in 2014, you had the race in Canada where both of their cars developed the same issue. In 2016, obviously, the Mercedes took each other out in Spain. And, there have been some races in between there where things just haven't gone their way. Even in Singapore in 2015, that's another one that comes to mind where Mercedes just didn't have the right package, and Ferrari and Vettel were able to capitalize on that. So I'm sure there will be an opportunity later this season, given the recent gains that Mercedes have made, for Lewis to keep that win streak alive. And who knows, if they continue to improve, he might even be able to do it on raw pace. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, a larger discussion point here. Obviously, the sprint race came back this weekend for the second time this year. We're now 5 races into the F1 sprint era. Like I mentioned, Max Verstappen's won 3 of them. So, Kobe, to borrow a phrase from another series that we covered here on this program, Do you like what we're seeing? And have your thoughts on F1 Sprint changed at all since it was first introduced?
It seems like every time we have a Formula One sprint race, we're always answering this exact same question. And to answer this again, no, my opinion on the sprint races haven't changed. I still view the sprint races as totally pointless. I really don't understand what they're trying to do. I guess I want to give the fans an extra show, and then the feature races, just an encore if you like what you saw on Saturday. But I am a supporter of the sprint race format in Formula 3 and Formula 2. I think it works out pretty well there. But as for the main show in Formula 1, I think we just really just need to stick with the Grand Prix itself. I don't really see what a sprint race truly adds. I don't understand why we're still doing the sprint races. I really wish that we would just do away with the idea and just focus on the main race itself, because as we've seen in most of the sprint races so far, it really hasn't done anything significant to the main show at all.
Now, I still remember when our colleague Josh Birch came on Grid Live Wrap Up last year and said every fan I've spoken to has hated it. And, I honestly can say I'm the same way. I haven't really met somebody that, is super passionate, at least. Maybe some people are indifferent, some people don't mind it, but it's hard to find people that are truly passionate about F1 Sprint. And, I guess that they think that it's more exciting than just having an FP3 practice session. But, I don't think that makes up for the lackluster sprint races that we've seen from time to time. And the other thing that bothers me, my biggest problem with F1 Sprint isn't even the fact that, sometimes we get these boring quick races with no pit strategy and everything. My biggest problem with F1 Sprint is the fact that we're making these changes mid-season, and we're taking a world championship that consists of, what is it now, 20? I think it's down to 22 races. We're not going to replace Russia, so whatever it is, a little more than 20 races, and 3 of them were setting the field and setting the starting grid and determining who's listed in the record books as having the pole position differently than we are the other 19. So where's the consistency in that? I think people know, if they watch this program, they follow me on social media, that I'm all about consistency. I wouldn't have as much of a problem with F1 Sprint if they decided to do it for the entire season. I'm not advocating for that at all, but I'm saying I'd have even less of a problem with it then, because then at the bare minimum, you would at least have a consistent method for determining who sits on pole position all throughout the year. It seems very silly to me that there's 3 races that seem to kind of be arbitrarily chosen, where we have this different qualifying format for each of them. And then we go back to the regular format that supposedly they're trialing this sprint race format to try to do away with for the rest of the year. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to do that. So I'm all about consistency. I don't like the fact that it's only 3 times a year and seems to be randomly placed in the middle of the calendar. But just looking at the sprint race itself, I haven't seen too much that, makes me like what I'm seeing, if you will. And I don't think that this is something that Formula One should really go ahead and implement for a full season going forward. And one more point on it, it really bothers me that the winner of a sprint race is the one that is granted pole position. I know sometimes it doesn't make a difference because the driver that starts on pole for the sprint race goes on to win the race anyway. But the driver that's fastest in Q3, in my mind, should be who's listed as the record books as taking pole position, because they set the fastest lap. And that's what pole means by definition. So I'm not a fan of that either.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points about consistency, and thinking back to all of the F1 sprint races. The one moment I can remember that the sprint races probably had a major impact on the main show was, I believe it was Sao Paulo last year in Brazil, when Lewis Hamilton had that incredible drive going from deep in the field all the way to the front to win the race. I think that's probably the only awesome moment to come out of the sprint race, where Lewis had to battle the adversity and drive the car all the way through the field. So I think that was probably the one most memorable moment I can have from the sprint race. But otherwise, I agree with all the points you made, and don't really see why we really need them. And next one be moving on to the NASCAR Cup Series, and they're going to be racing at Atlanta Motor Speedway, which opened in the year 1960. And the track has gone through 3 major changes over the years, from a straight path going down the front stretch to the tri-oval design similar to Charlotte Motor Speedway. Now 28 degrees of banking in the turns. In the spring race, we saw racing similar to Daytona and Talladega, with pack racing and drafting. Do you believe we'll see a similar race, or could handling become more of a factor with the warmer temperatures? I remember when NASCAR used to come down to Daytona for the 4th of July, everybody always talked about a handling race.
Yeah, I think you could see a slightly different race here, but like we saw, at Daytona all those years ago, like you were talking about, Kobe. I think you're still going to see a pack race similar to what we saw when we went there earlier this season. I know that the asphalt is slightly older now, but again, think of how many years we ran at Atlanta before we repaved it this last time around, and obviously reconfigured it to get the kind of racing that we're seeing right now. I think just a handful of months being in the summer heat, I don't think that's going to change things up too much. It might make handling a little bit more important, but I do think you're going to see a similar race to what we saw earlier this season. Of course, that's the only race we have to base it on, so kind of hard to predict once again, since there's not a whole history there. It's still a very new experiment that we're doing at this new Atlanta Super Speedway, as some people are calling it. But to answer the question, I do think it's probably not going to be exactly the same, but I think the style of racing that you're going to see is going to be pretty similar to what we've seen earlier this year at Atlanta.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I also believe that the racing is probably gonna be a lot similar. It's gonna be unpredictable. Gonna be chaotic. Drivers are gonna be making late blocks. We might even see a big one this time around. We saw some pretty big hits in the first race earlier in the year. So hopefully everybody's gonna stay safe out there. It was really crazy in the spring, and now that we're in the summer, I think it's gonna be even wilder than what we saw last time around, because of the playoff picture, which we're going to get into in a moment. But this race is going to be extremely important for all contenders out there on the track. And we've been talking about all the different winners this year. We're up to 13 now after Tyler Reddick's win last weekend at Road American. An incredible amount of parity this year in the NASCAR Cup Series. Has been a handful of drivers looking to punch their ticket into the postseason with the win. However, many drivers with one win would love to get two. Only 5 drivers have 2 wins. Nobody's broken through at the top to get a third win. Last year at this point, Kyle Larson had 4 wins, Alex Bowman, Martin Truex Jr. had 3, 2 for Chase Elliott, and we only had 11 different winners compared to 13 now. So a lot has changed, just from last year. Which possibility is most likely to occur? The first 3-time winner of the season, or the 14th different winner?
It's a tough question because, again, super speedway racing can be kind of a wild card. But I'm going to go with the first 3-time winner. I think that there's enough 2-time winners in the field that have run strong all season that you're probably going to see one of them break through sooner rather than later. And I think it could very well come this weekend at Atlanta. I do want to say, though, just on the note of parity, it is pretty amazing what we've seen so far, not just this season, but, in recent years. I saw something this week that kind of blew me away. I think this is the first time since 2003, but if you look at the top 25 in Cup Series points as they run, they all at least have one career win to their name. And, that just speaks to the talent of the next generation of drivers that we've had come up over the last several years, and the parity that we've had this year. Kobe, like you mentioned, 13 of them have wins this year alone. So, I'm gonna hold it out and ride it out and hope that I'm not proven wrong. I don't think we get to 16 winners by the time the playoffs begin. But you got to get to 13 at this point of the year before you can get to 16. So could we see it? Absolutely. But I don't think we see a new winner this weekend. I think one of the 3-time winners will preserve and break through. Possibly Ross Chastain. Like I said, Trackhouse have been absolutely on fire this year. And Ross won Talladega earlier this year as well. So we know he can get it done in the pack and on super speedway style races. So that would maybe be my early pick a winner. I know we'll hold the pick a winner officially till the end of the show, but I'm going to go. You're going to see a first 3-time winner this season instead of a 14th different winner on Sunday.
Yeah, and Ross Chastain is certainly a solid pick. And if you think back to the ending of the Atlanta Spring Race, in which William Byron won, who had a run at the very end of that race to try to pass William Byron but couldn't get it done. Both Trackhouse Racing Chevrolets, it was Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez who were running in the top 5 there at the end. And I really think that Trackhouse, their program is as strong as we've ever seen it so far, and they're going to be building a lot of momentum head into the playoffs. And it would not surprise me if we see a Ross Chastain go to victory lane again, or even his teammate Daniel Suarez, who got his first career win at Sonoma. I know Daniel Suarez is really riding on a high right now, still from Sonoma, and getting a second win right now. Can't imagine what that would do for his confidence right now. And I'm not going to give away my pick a winner yet, but I agree with you, Ben. I think we're going to see the first three-time winner this season. I think it's going to be a Toyota driver. And for all of our viewers watching right now, you try to guess which Toyota driver I'm going to go with. I think we could certainly see a 14 different winner. Get, as you mentioned, the crazy nature of super speedway racing. But I really think all of the stars are going to align for the first three-time winner of the 2022 season. I think we could potentially get a 14 different winner before it's all said and done. Still have 8 races to go in the regular season. But if I had to pick between Atlanta and Daytona to get that 14th different winner, I definitely have to go for Daytona International Speedway. And looking at the standings, Chase Elliott currently sits at the top of the points and playoff standings. However, Ryan Blaney is not far behind Elliott in the regular season points battle, 33 points back, and he's had some success at Atlanta. In the playoff standings, though, Blaney is actually 14th. 3 more race winners, and he could find himself in trouble if he doesn't win a race or the regular season title. And Ben, getting back to the playoff format, it's kind of mind blowing that Ryan Blaney is in contention to win the regular season title. He's been very consistent all year, just hasn't been able to break through. But playoffs wise, if we keep clicking off these different winners, Ryan Blaney could find himself on the outside looking in. Really crazy to think that in this era of NASCAR, and if Blaney is in contention for the win in the final laps, given that situation, do you anticipate seeing a more aggressive Ryan Blaney than usual?
Yeah, what a great system where the guy's second in points. We're talking about he could potentially be in trouble missing the playoffs, right? What a fantastic system we have here. Listen, I think Ryan Blaney is definitely going to be a little bit more aggressive this weekend. We know he has several wins on super speedways in his career already. So I think Ryan Blaney, you talk about him, contending for the regular season championship. I know he is a little bit behind Chase Elliott right now, but I think if Ryan Blaney's going to win the regular season championship, he's probably going to win a race on his way to doing that. So I think it's very unlikely that he's going to win the regular season championship and earn his automatic playoff bid that way. And then you could have, looking at a system where, we only have 15 winners, and that's enough to lock out anybody from making it in on points because Blaney gets the 16th with the regular season title. So, I think we're definitely going to see Blaney turn the aggression up, throughout the next 8 races, generally speaking. But on super speedways in particular, where he's been so strong in the past, I think you're going to see it turned up even more, including this weekend here at Atlanta.
Yeah, we have seen an aggressive Ryan Blaney in the past on the super speedways. Probably why he's had a lot of success at Talladega, where Ryan Blaney pulling aggressive moves late and knowing where to put his car in the right spot. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Blaney do that same thing this weekend at Atlanta. And as I said and you said, Ben, it's really crazy that one of the most consistent drivers in the Cup Series this year, and we're talking about the possibility of him not even being able to make the playoffs right at this moment. I don't think Brian Blaney will have anything to worry about because it's still going to be an uphill climb to try to get to those 16 different race winners. But for Blaney to feel completely comfortable, I'm sure he certainly hopes that he can try to win one of these races in the next 8 weeks leading up to the playoffs. It's really coming fast, and Ryan Blaney, I'm sure he's probably going to be one of the favorites to win this weekend at Atlanta, as I mentioned, given his success on the super speedways. But overall, it's really hard to predict who's going to win because in this type of racing, is just like put all the names in the hat, pull it out, and there's your winner right there. And it's just really crazy to see the type of era we're in right now at Atlanta Motor Speedway. If you asked me 5 years ago that Atlanta would be a super speedway now, I would laugh at you because I did not see this coming.
Yeah, I think everybody knew it needed to be repaved, but this new configuration is really kind of been a shock to all of our systems here. We see this pack racing now 6 times a year instead of just 4. But I think Ryan Blaney fans probably don't have to hit the panic button just yet. If we get a 14 and 15 different winner, then okay, maybe it's time to turn the aggression up even further and start to worry a little bit. But I think he's sitting in pretty good shape right now and doesn't have too much to worry about unless we get a couple more wild card winners, such as potentially Bubba Wallace, who's in a must-win situation, or Brad Keselowski, who is in a situation like that as well. They're both very good super speedway racers, so they could take Atlanta and Daytona and one each and lock themselves into the playoffs, and then who knows what's going to happen in that situation. But I think Blaney fans probably don't have to worry too much just yet. Now let's move on to Supercars and the Recco Supercars Championship, We only have a pair of 250-kilometer races this weekend, making up a total distance of 500 kilometers of racing for the NTI Townsville 500. 88 laps, lots of strategy with teams deciding when to utilize the super soft and hard tire compounds. This is a longer race distance than we are used to in the super sprint format, so it took a while to watch the strategies unfold, which led to an intense battle with less than 10 laps to go. Will Davison had a sizable 17-second lead, but guess who? Who else? Shane Van Gisbergen was on the charge with the freshest super soft tires eating into Davison's lead. Davison tried his very best to defend, but the Red Bull Ampol driver caught the Shell V-Power forward with 5 laps to go. Van Gisbergen passed Davison, and it was game over. SVG picks up win number 10 of the year, extending his championship points lead after failing to win a single race of the last race weekend, the Darwin Triple Crown. In the last 4 races, there have been 4 different winners, but SVG continues to set the bar very high for his competitors to match. So, Kobe, will the streak continue? Will we have a 5th different winner in a row, or will SVG get back to his old ways and sweep both Townsville races?
And just when I say this is the finest drive I've ever seen from Shane Van Gisbergen, he always backs it up with an even finer drive. And I can say that race 1 at Townsville, it was definitely one of the best drives I've ever seen from SVG. As you mentioned, 17 seconds back, Will Davison, he was really a sitting duck out there on those tires, while Shane Van Gisbergen had the freshest, and he was really, really coming, in the final stint of the race there, following the pit stop. And it was just quite a performance to make up that size of gap to get around Davison. We saw Shane Van Gisbergen coming; he was getting closer and closer. And as when he got to Davison's back bumper, I think we all knew what was going to happen next. There was really nothing Will Davison can do. Davison drove a really fine race, but when you have Shane Van Gisbergen in the field, is really hard to be able to go against him, no matter how talented you are. So getting back to the question you asked, I think we have a greater chance of seeing SVG getting back to his old ways and sweeping the weekend in Townsville. But it seemed like at the Darwin Triple Crown, the last race weekend you mentioned, it seemed like Van Gisbergen was possibly, still recovering from competing in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And anyone who's flying my plane knows the jet lag is real, going from Australia to France, from France back to Australia. And even though Shane Van Gisbergen had a few days to rest, he still had to run all the 3 races, and I wondering if it had any effect on his driving performance in Darwin, because it was really unusual to see us go through an entire Supercars weekend and Shane Van Gisbergen not win a single race. But since had almost, well, not a month off, but close to a month off from Supercars racing, able to reset his mind, go out there, and he looked like the SVG we've been seeing before, going winless at Darwin. It would be nice to see a 5th different winner, to keep the consistency going. But I really do believe that we're going to see Shane Van Gisbergen back up the performance in race 1 and take race 2.
I got to say, maybe I'm SVG's good luck charm, because I haven't played Pick a Winner the last couple of race weekends. And, I usually just pick SVG by default, since Supercars isn't the series that I follow most. But I know how dominant SVG has been over the last several years. I'm back on Grid tonight in the pre-race show, filling in for Adam this week, and I pick SVG, and he goes out and wins. So, I'll hold my Pick a Winner till the end of the show here. But, well done to SVG for helping me close the gap a little bit in the Pick a Winner game. And, I certainly wouldn't put it past him to sweep the entire weekend either.
Yeah, SVG is at the top of his game right now. It seemed like in Darwin that the other competitors might be closing the gap, and that they might have found something to match Red Bull Ampol Racing. But SVG showed us in race 1, it's still his championship to lose, and he's still in control at the very top of the mountain. And we'll see if he's able to sweep the weekend later tonight. And other things happening tonight. The second half of the 2022 Camping World SRX Series season kicks off. 3 races down, 3 races to go, and a return to the Music City, Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. Last year, we saw father and son duke it out, Chase Elliott versus Bill Elliott. This year, a 13-car field, 2-time Daytona 500 champion and NASCAR Cup Series champion Matt Kenseth makes his SRX debut, while a Nashville native will get to race in his own backyard. 2-time NTT IndyCar Series champion Josef Newgarden will run the SRX race tonight and start on the pole in Heat 1 at the fairgrounds. Believe it or not, this is Newgarden's very first time in his racing career trying out a different discipline of racing. It's also rare for Team Penske to allow its drivers to compete outside of the organization in a different series. And I know in the past, Newgarden has stated he's wanted to make his sports car racing debut. Unfortunately, that hadn't been able to happen yet, but now Team Penske allowing him to race in SRX. We've seen drivers from IndyCar really take the fight to the drivers from NASCAR so far this season. Can Newgarden just drop in and casually take a win in front of his hometown crowd?
I got to say, I'm a little surprised Penske's letting him do this. I'm certainly not complaining, but I remember Will Power saying several years ago, he's wanted to do the double sometime, the Indy 500, Coke 600, and Roger said, win a championship and a 500, and then we'll talk. And Josef only has one of those things. He's still looking for that Indy 500 win. But like I said, certainly not complaining here. It's great to have him in the field for his home race, but I don't expect him to be able to just come in here his first time in a different style race car and take the fight to drivers that have been doing this for much longer than him and win the race. Now, I'm not going to be shocked. We know Josef Newgarden is certainly a very talented race car driver, and I'm sure that he can pick it up very quickly and adapt very quickly, but you can't make up for that lack of experience that drivers such as Ryan Newman, Tony Stewart, Bobby Labonte, Matt Kenseth have. So I think the winner is probably going to come from the usual group of drivers that we've seen run up front so far this season.
And you mentioned your shot that Roger Penske will let Josef Newgarden do. That's another Team Penske driver who we're going to see later on in the SRX season. Going to be Ryan Blaney. He's going to be running on the dirt at Sharon Speedway. Basically the Blaney racetrack. There's going to be another father versus son on the dirt. He's going to be racing against his dad, Dave Blaney, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to be excited to see Ryan and Dave go against each other. Yeah, really interesting to see Roger Penske allowing his drivers to race outside of different series. And you brought up the good point about Will Power wanting to do the double. Will Power's won an IndyCar title. He's won an Indy 500, and Roger Penske still hasn't let him attempt the double like that. So I don't know where that stands. And in the past, Josef Newgarden has said he'd be interested in potentially running a NASCAR race, and Roger Penske hasn't move forward with that either. Yeah, so it's a surprise to see Josef in the field in general, but I'm sure a lot of people are going to be tuned in to watch him race in front of his hometown track. We've seen him race on the streets of Nashville last year, and now he's going to be on the bull ring at the Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. And I'm not sure how Josef will perform tonight, but I'm sure a lot of people in IndyCar are going to be watching, and a lot of local fans in the Nashville, Tennessee area are going to come out to see their favorite IndyCar driver try to get it done against the stars of motorsports. And winning a fan vote to secure his spot in tonight's race is two-time Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway track champion Cole Williams, who enters this week and battling some adversity of his own. Last month, he lost his pro late model ride with Rackley War at the fairgrounds. A tough break for a driver who really knows how to get around this place better than most and still trying to prove himself in stock car racing. So far this season, we haven't seen the local track star visit victory lane like Doug Coby did last year at Stafford. Bubba Pollard raced at Five Flags Speedway. Peyton Sellers at South Boston. Matt Hirschman was this year's representative at Stafford. So, Ben, how much would a win in front of a national audience help Cole Williams' racing career that took an unexpected turn recently?
Well, look what it did for Doug Coby last year. It got him an extended opportunity for his career. I don't doubt that it could do the same for Cole Williams. And even if he doesn't win, we've seen, a lot of people know Bubba Pollard's name now, and Peyton Sellers and Matt Hirschman. These are all guys that got an opportunity to race on primetime network television on CBS in front of an audience that might not have been familiar with them, more familiar with the names that race in SRX full time. And they get to see these guys out there and not just, out there logging laps, but in most cases, they've been competitive. These are track champions. These are drivers that have earned the right to be there and deserve to be there. So I think, even if he doesn't win, Cole Williams just being in the field tonight is going to help propel his racing career forward a little bit by getting his name out there. Of course, if he does win the race, the sky's the limit for what could happen to him.
Yeah, sky's the limit. And if we think back to Slinger Speedway last year, everyone remembers the name Luke Fenhouse. Nobody had heard of Luke Fenhouse before being able to run that sort of race at Slinger, and then he goes out there, he's battling Tony Stewart for the win. Then most people in the racing community know who Luke Fenhouse is, and his great run at Slinger last year. Fenhouse was able to get an ARCA off-season test at Daytona International Speedway. Unfortunately, we really haven't seen a lot of movement towards Finhouse racing in NASCAR since getting that ARCA test. And I'm not sure what's going on in that area, but it really helped put Finhouse in the spotlight and got a lot of people talking about him. So that's one of the great things about SRX. And you mentioned Doug Kobe being able to go out there, get the win at Stafford in the inaugural SRX race, and then able to make his NASCAR Camping World Truck Series debut shortly after the fact. And looking at Cole Williams, the story really unfortunate that for him to lose his pro late model ride with Rackley Ward. I know he invested a lot to try to get that ride, considering that it's really good equipment, and to be able to lose that. And it seems like it's the perfect timing now that he's going to be in the SRX race tonight. And as you mentioned, Ben, just being in the race in front of a national audience is special enough for him, and he's going to try to prove to everybody that I belong. I deserve greater opportunities in the motorsports world. And last night when I was working on this segment about Cole Williams, I was looking on his website and said on his site that he has aspirations of racing in NASCAR. And if Cole Williams is able to get the job done tonight against all these superstars in the SRX field, maybe just maybe a door will open up where Cole Williams can try to go out there and pursue a NASCAR. And at the halfway mark of the SRX season, Ryan Newman continues to lead the championship by 11 points over inaugural SRX champion Tony Stewart, while Bobby Labonte and Marco Andretti are tied for third in the championship, only 12 points separating the top four drivers. So it's really tightening up there at the top of the championship. And let's do a brief mid-season report card. Which drivers are your biggest surprise and disappointment up to this point?
I think the biggest surprise is Ryan Newman. I mean, this is a guy that, hadn't been super competitive in his Cup career in the latter stages of the last several seasons, and has been out of a car for a little while, and now is here. He's won an SRX race, and he is currently leading the points right now. So you have to give credit where it's due. He has been a very pleasant surprise to see him running well again and even winning a race. That's great to see. In terms of the biggest disappointment, I'm probably going to have to go with Michael Waltrip to be full-time in the series that only has 12 or 13 cars. And, I was just checking the stats before we came on the show here this afternoon. Doesn't even have a top 10 finish so far this season in a field of, like I said, the field size is only 12 or 13, and to not even have a top 10 3 races in when, he's shown some speed in the past and he's run up front in the past, but clearly hasn't been able to close the deal. He's probably my biggest disappointment at this point of the year.
And for my biggest surprise, I definitely have to agree with you on Ryan Newman. As you mentioned, last season he finished 28th in the Cup Series standings. So right towards the end of all of the full time drivers, had a real dismal season when the team was still called Roush Fenway Racing as RFK Racing. Roush Fenway, Keselowski, Ryan Newman probably didn't end his NASCAR Cup Series career the way he wanted. Not really competitive. Things not really going well. It really seems like after his bad crash in the Daytona 500 in 2020, we really saw a drop off of his performance in the NASCAR Cup Series. It's still remarkable that he was able to come back and sit in a race car and still get behind the wheel. And for Newman to go out there, when the SRX race last weekend and been running consistent up to this halfway point of the season, really impressive. And it seems like Tony Stewart is really gonna have his hands full with Newman up there for the SRX championship. And for biggest disappointments, I'm actually gonna go with two drivers, one who's running full time and one who's only running part time this season, but ran full time last. And for first disappointment, I think is Ryan Hunter-Reay. I expected a lot more from RHR and SRX. Understanding, this is not the style of racing that he's used to, coming from the IndyCar series, but I certainly expected that he would be doing a lot better. We saw some glimpses of what Ryan Hunter-Reay is capable in SRX last week at Stafford, running well in the heat race. And then once we got to the feature race, he really wasn't in contention at all. So I think I really expected more out of Ryan Hunter-Reay in the SRX series, and I think we saw the greater performance from RHR last weekend, because he admitted that he took preparation a little bit more seriously, and took a closer look at everything. I think that's really helped him along. We'll see if he can try to improve his performance in the second half of the season. The second disappointment certainly has to be Ernie Francis Jr., who really set the world on fire last year in SRX. Running very well up close to the front, mixing it up with all of the drivers. And then in his 2 SRX races, he's run at Five Flag Speedway in South Boston. Ernie's really been he was nowhere. I know he's focusing on his full-time Indy Lights campaign. That's why we're not going to see him running full-time. But in both races we've seen from Ernie, he didn't look like the same driver we saw last year. He didn't look like the driver we saw win at IRP. It was just so many things going wrong in both of his SRX races that he's run so far this year, and he's also having a tough rookie year in the Indy Lights series. And I believe when I was in the chat on the Encore show on Monday night, I was saying to see Ernie Francis get another year in that series, potentially with a more competitive team like an Andretti Autosport. Let him get some time to develop, because I've made this point before, and you have too, Ben. I feel like we really like to give on drivers way too early, and instead of letting them see what they can do. I know this is a what have you done for me lately, and comparing to other sports, in the past with rookie quarterbacks in the NFL, in the past they would get maybe 1-2 years to develop, and then by year 3 or year 4, they're ready to start, kind of like we saw in Green Bay with transition from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. But now you're a rookie quarterback, you're expected to start from day one and try to lead the team to the playoffs. And I feel like a lot you can compare that to what goes on in racing nowadays as well.
Yeah, the examples I can think of are maybe William Byron or Joey Logano or Daniel Suarez, guys like that coming up that probably got pushed to Cup a little bit sooner than they would have liked, and struggled in their rookie seasons to so much as even get top 10 finishes and equipment that's capable of competing for championships. And everybody's saying, well, it's been a year and we've given them enough time, we should drop them already. And I'm not a fan of that at all. I think, especially nowadays when we're seeing these guys and girls in some cases get started so young, we need to give them more time to develop before we completely throw the bus label on them and want them out of the car. And I think Ernie in Indy Lights is going to be a similar situation there. I know he's been consistently running 8th, 9th, or 10th in a field that has only 14 cars in it. But I think it's still way too early to pull the plug on him. I think you certainly have to give him a second season. I do agree that he's been a little bit underwhelming in SRX so far this year. I would have liked to have seen him do a little bit better there. But again, the season's only halfway over. There's still time to recover and pick things back up. So we'll see. Maybe he can do that tonight. Now on to Adam's favorite segment. I see Adam's here in the chat this afternoon. He's going to give his picks for pick a winner. Verstappen on the F1 side, Chase Elliott for NASCAR, and he's going with SVG to sweep the weekend. On the Supercars side of things, Kobe, I'll start with you. Who do you have winning the Austrian Grand Prix this weekend?
Well, we already talked about the home field advantage at the very beginning of the show. It's the Red Bull ring. Red Bull driver won the sprint race. I mean, Red Bull is on the pole. I think they're going to get the sweep. Max Verstappen, think he's going to get the job done and win the Austrian Grand Prix.
I think I'm going to make it unanimous here. I don't see the Ferraris challenging Max Verstappen this weekend. He's starting in the best possible position. He's looked strong all weekend long, and he does have that home field advantage, like you mentioned. I'm going with Verstappen to win the Formula One Grand Prix this weekend. Now we'll shift gears to a completely different track and a completely different series, NASCAR Cup Racing at Atlanta, the Atlanta Super Speedway, as some have dubbed it. Kobe, who do you have taking the win there?
And as many know, Atlanta is in the backyard of Coca-Cola's headquarters. Who's driving the Coca-Cola sponsored car this weekend? He's a Coca-Cola racing driver. The driver to number 11, Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota, Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin's run really well in the super speedways, and Atlanta races like a super speedway now. So I think Denny Hamlin and riding Coca-Cola's backyard, I think he's going to get the job done in Atlanta.
I agree with you that we're going to see our first 3-time winner, but I don't agree with the driver that's going to get it done. Like I hinted at earlier in the show, I'm going to go with Ross Chastain. Trackhouse have been strong all year, and Ross has been particularly strong on the super speedways of Atlanta and Talladega. I'm going to go with Ross Chastain to be the first 3-time winner this season. Now on to Supercars. Kobe, do you think SVG sweeps the weekend, or do we see yet another different winner?
Yes, SVG is going to sweep the weekend. He already won the first 250-kilometer event. I think he's going to get the other 250-kilometer 80-lap race tonight. And SVG is going to have all 500 kilometers to take home the entire NTI Townsville 500 race weekend sweep.
Well, once again, I'm going to make it unanimous here. I pick SVG almost every race. He hasn't let me down yet, so I'm going to go with SVG to sweep the weekend as well and take race number 2. Finally, SRX. Kobe, who do you have winning at Nashville tonight?
I think my pick might shock a lot of people. We're already talking about him, but I'm not sure if you would call this an upset. But I think Josef Newgarden is going to drop in and he's going to win and really show his driving talent against all of these SRX competitors. And it's going to be a party in the Music City when all those fans of the track see their hometown boy go out there and get it done under the lights in prime time.
What a story that would be for Josef Newgarden, his first race in a completely different car than what he's used to get a win would be fantastic, especially in a field of racing champions. But I'm not going to pick him to win the race. I'm going to go with Tony Stewart. I think it's a little bit more of a safe bet, but he runs the series, he runs SRX, and he runs very well as a driver in SRX as well. I'm going to go with Tony Stewart to get the win tonight at Nashville. I'll head it over back to you, Kobe, for the closing part of the show.
Yeah, Tony Stewart, definitely a safe bet, or even a Ryan Newman, two of the most consistent drivers in this SRX championship this year. And before we go up the air, I want to share some breaking news from the Red Bull Ring. The FIA has just handed Sebastian Vettel a 25,000 pound fine after they said he left a drivers meeting without permission. And the FIA released a statement saying that drivers at this level are role models for every driver around the world. And in the opinion of the steward, Sebastian Vettel failed to live up to that standard in that case. So some more issues going on there with the FIA, Sebastian Vettel, race control. We'll definitely be following that situation throughout the weekend. And with that said, out of time for today. Please be sure to like and subscribe to GRIDnet Network here on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We encourage you to take 5 minutes after our show and consider joining our Patreon. Invest in GRIDnet Network to keep us on the air well into the future. Do you want to buy me a coffee? Click the link in the video description below, and you can buy a drink for your favorite on-air talent here at GRIDnet Network. Want to give a big thank you to Edward Hunter from Louisiana, Amber, and Zachary for buying us a coffee. We greatly appreciate it. Any amount will help us continue growing our motorsports media outlet. Visit public.com, also known as the stock market social media home. The link below and referral code GRIDnet will give you $5 to invest. Public.com allows you to connect with your friends. You can make new friends and use tools to learn how to properly invest in the stock market. And looking at our upcoming schedule for the next couple of days, Sunday, Grid Live wrap up 90 minutes after the NASCAR Cup Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and then Monday night, Grid Live Encore with Ben and Brandon Crossland at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about from this racing weekend. And for Ben Snyder, I'm Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish. Thank you for watching and enjoy the races.
Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDNET for your free $5 to invest and start investing and networking on public.com.